In this lesson, we'll learn how we can start to create custom heads-up displays inside of Cinema 4D. Okay, so just like all the other lessons we've worked with so far, we're just going to start with a blank scene. And let's start with maybe just a simple cube. Okay, so we'll put this over here and maybe just add in a couple more, just for the sake of demonstration. Okay, now let's say that we are working with objects inside of Cinema 4D, and maybe we want to be able to access certain attributes really easily. So let's say maybe we want to have full control over the height of this cube. So if we select that cube and go over into its Objects tab down here in the Attribute Manager, you can see where we can start to control things like the size X, Y, and Z of this. The same thing can also be done by adjusting this manipulator here. But sometimes there may be instances where you might find it a little bit easier to actually have some sort of a little heads-up display that is actually here in the viewport. This is actually one of the things I really like about Cinema 4D, the fact that we have this capability. So we can take pretty much any attribute that we want from the Attribute Manager and drop it so that it's displayed directly here inside the viewport. So let's say, for example, we want to have control over the size X, Y, and Z. All we have to do is simply take the attribute. You'll notice whenever I select it, all of these become available. Now if I click and drag, just simply left click, you see I can just take that attribute, drop it, and now it's listed right out here in the viewport. So now with that cube selected, I can just come over here, hover my mouse over one of these numbers. Now just slide my mouse to the left and to the right, and now I can adjust any attribute right from here. And I can do this pretty much for anything that I wanted. So if I wanted to come in here and maybe enable the fillet, I could come in here, maybe take something like my fillet radius. Again, just simply left click and drag that into my viewport. And now the fillet radius, which basically controls how rounded these corners become, I have full control over that. And again, if I wanted to, I don't even have to go into my Attribute Manager anymore. Now, one of the things you'll notice is as soon as I select another object, those attributes that we had sort of floating here in our viewport will now disappear. Once I select my object, those attributes will come back. Now, if I wanted to rearrange these, you'll notice it won't actually let me move those windows. So if you want to move those, just press and hold the Control key on your keyboard and put your mouse in one of the corners, and now you can move these around. There you go. So really nice functionality that we have here. If we want to, let's say maybe we don't want these little heads-up displays to disappear once we deselect the object. So what we could do is if we right-click in this heads-up display, we could go to Show, and you can see right now Cinema 4D has this by default set to only show whenever the object is active. But if we wanted to, we could say maybe we want this heads-up display to be visible always. Turn that on, and now even when I deselect my object, that particular heads-up display stays in place. And now I can actually come in here and start to work on this object without even having to have it selected. And really this applies to just about anything. So if I come down here to my Material Manager, double-click, let's come in here and I'll just simply left-click and drag this material onto this object. Now if I select this object here, let's say I wanted to have a heads-up display for the material color. I can just go over here to the color, grab that, simply left-click and drag that into my viewport, and now here's my material color, red, green, and blue. So I can come in here and start to adjust that, again, all without ever having to go back to the Attribute Manager. So really nice functionality that we have here. There are a few other options here inside of this heads-up display. So if we right-click, we can turn on things like Follow. So now, as I start to move my cube around, you'll notice that that heads-up display will actually sort of move right along with it and follow that around. Once it starts to move off screen, though, it may start to sort of impede that. You can see now my cube is off screen, but the heads-up display still stays sort of here in my viewport. So sometimes that can become a little bit of an annoyance, but overall this does become a really nice feature to have. And for the most part, I really like to leave that follow option turned off, so that way this little guy pretty much just stays right where I want it. Again, press and hold the Control key. I can move this over. So typically, if I'm going to be using these, I like to just kind of keep these off to the side so that way they're kind of nice and out of the way. Now, if we wanted to completely remove these, you can just right-click and hit Remove. There's that one gone. Right-click and remove that one. So these heads-up display features, like I said, become really, really useful for adjusting attributes, for animating attributes in a much, much simpler, much more efficient way.